Good evening, everybody. Tonight I plan to give you facts and reasons as to why there are shortages in 2021. And JIT, if you haven't heard of it, it stands for just-in-time. Just-in-time manufacturing, it was invented by Toyota because they could not operate like American auto manufacturers who use batch manufacturing, which took advantage of large economies of scale. And this required large capital outlays, large inventories, large automobile markets. Toyota didn't have the money, and Japan didn't have a large automobile market. JIT, just in time, means having the right parts at the right place at just the right time. In 1954, it was implemented by Taiichi Ohno, along with Jidoka. I think I said that right. Jidoka automation is intelligent automation, or as they call it, automation with a human touch. Under Jidoka, Toyota automates as much of the manufacturing process, including error detection. Machine stops when an error is detected, then humans come by, they fix the problem, and then they try to find a way to prevent the problem from occurring in the future. JIT and Jidoka are constantly improving their process. These are the two main ideas at the center of Toyota's total production system. Toyota grows its sales. JIT has been a critical part of their system. They worked on it through the 50s and 60s. It implements the system along with other improvements. Toyota coordinates with their suppliers, and they in turn implement JIT. Jidoka, which is improved over the years, leads to higher quality and economical cars. Sales skyrocket in Japan. Sales increased from 1954 to 1960 by 600%, and from 1960 to 1970, they increased 870%. And they got up to the 1 million mark over there. Many companies worldwide increased their imitation of the JIT system, but forgot many of the other Toyota factors that made it successful. JIT does work at reducing costs, but it is not the only important thing that Toyota did to make it work well for them. And these are the overseas sales, which include to America. And you see over here, in 1975, when they brought their cars like the Toyota Corolla to the US, this was right after the oil crisis, the first oil shock. And then in 79, you had the next one for the Iran hostage crisis. And so they jumped from about 1 million to about 2 million. And they just kept on going. JIT gains attention. Toyota's success leads to JIT gaining attention. Publications about JIT begin in the early 80s. Manufacturers begin to copy Toyota by implementing a poor copy of that system. Excess inventory or warehouses, either of those two things, they cost you money by having stock that's not making you money, just sitting around, or having to pay to maintain a warehouse that eats into your profits. So JIT saves money by eliminating those costs, but it doesn't eliminate all inventories. It's meant to eliminate excess inventories. So the difference between what Toyota did with JIT was crucial because they had the Jidoka system for repairing. You find the mistake, and then a workman stops the line. They come around, they fix it. There's other things that are connected to this, and the JIT. Those two things, along with other aspects of it, such as short distances from suppliers, which our supply chain, everybody knows, doesn't have them. So we're going to cross halfway around the world to get to China and Asia just to get our supplies and our products. So on Japan, a small island, if there was a disruption that happened, they could still get supplies quickly by working with other suppliers nearby. There was cross-manufacturing training. So their workforce was flexible. They could do more than one type of work on an assembly line. They had this respecting those highly trained people. They showed their loyalty by valuing them, and the employees in turn knew that they were very important to the manufacturing process in the company. Stopping production, this Jidoka process, when a flaw is found and fixing it, learning to get things done right the first time. This led to greater and greater quality. They never stopped improving. Removing excess inventory, not all the inventory. They produced even at their daily demand average, even if demand dropped over a short period of time. These that I'm giving here are just some of the main reasons that made it effective, cost savings, but resilient. And that part about resilient and flexibility is something to keep in mind. So I think many of us, if we know something about how China after Mao and how they came out and started incorporating production, in the late 80s, they start inviting companies to come and set up companies in their mainland. And they become a major manufacturer. Slowly but surely, they start manufacturing stuff, and especially the low-end goods, such as consumer goods. JIT systems are incorporated around the world and throughout Asia. So we start to see that, maybe it's not that important when they're only doing this much in production, but as it gets closer and closer to where we are today in 2021, this only stops at 2017, you become very reliant on these providers. 2019. COVID-19 originates in China. China goes through the lockdowns first and recovers first. US goes into lockdown in March 2020. So what happens? Well, demand drops initially, but then it starts to rebound, but in certain areas. People who are not spending money on restaurants, travel, or other services, they switch their spending to goods for their homes, for their home offices. China has factories back online, along with some other Asian countries, and they start shipping to the US and Europe. So what I'm going to show you here is just a couple of ways that shortages occurred, and there's a whole bunch of them that we're going to look at the end. But let's take a look. Here's our timeline: spring 2020, summer, fall, winter 2021, spring, summer, fall. We're going to look at a few of these players: the car rental companies, the auto manufacturers, and the chip manufacturers. So COVID lockdowns begin in 2020. And car companies anticipate reduction of sales. That they were accurate about that. And they cancel their auto chip orders. So they cancel their orders. The chip manufacturers decide to stop making auto chips. And then they switch they're making them too alongside them. So say half auto and just randomly arm waving, half auto, half high-end consumer or electronics. So they say, well, we're going to switch our production to meet the demand. Plus we also have back supplies, and we're going to start making the high-end chips. And those chips are for PCs, servers, high-end electronics. Everybody who gets on Zoom explodes. People need to get their computers at home. They need to, I need my phone. I need this electronics. I haven't gotten it, so let me replace it. And so that's what the chip manufacturers do. Now, the car rental companies, they take a big hit. They don't have people to come out and rent the cars. Everybody's locked in. And Hertz, as one of the companies, I believe enters bankruptcy, but all of the rental car companies take a big hit. All the car companies take a big hit. So they need to raise cash. So they, during spring into the summer, they sell their inventories. So they can get by. By the fall, auto manufacturers figure out, well, we want to get some more chips. You know, they had some that were still coming in. So they decide, well, let's order some. So they order the chips. But because they canceled their original order, now they go to the back of the line. So the chip manufacturers overseas say, okay, well, you're going to have to wait. We've converted most of our stuff to these high-end chips, and it takes time to convert things back to auto manufacturing. By February 2021, Ford is running out of the crucial parts. They start cutting their shifts from 3 down to 1, and then they actually stop making cars. They shut down completely. Chip manufacturers, by the way, just if anyone wants to ask me why Toyota wasn't affected, ask me that later. The chip manufacturers start making chips, but it's a 6 to 9 month process from start to finish. They can't just be made anywhere. These are very, very expensive, what they call clean rooms, but the size of 2 soccer fields. So spring 2021, the car rental folks say, hey, we want some new cars. So they call for some cars, and there are no cars. So if they have anything left over, prices that are usually $30 to $50 a day for the summer, they're now $300 to $500 a day in some places, if you can find it. So shortages in one place lead to shortages in another place, which leads shortages in another place. So you're not going to say it's one thing that did it. All these different parts, and this is just one small example where people are linked together. So what does Australia's coal have to do with this? So the coal imports were reduced and halted. In Australia in the spring of 2020, they asked for international investigation into COVID-19. China doesn't like it. So they say no more products from Australia, including the coal, which they need. By November 2020, all of their imports have been halted. And they find some replacements, but there's a certain kind of coal, this thermal coal. It's more valuable in the sense for their industry than the other types of coal they have. And they're going through all their reserves. And this political decision starts to affect them. And they end up with an energy crunch. April 2021, I don't know how to put this, but if you are running out of fuel and you need to tell your boss, and then they have to tell their boss, and that has to go all the way back to Beijing, you don't want to be the one that tells them things aren't working. In China, you always say things are working and hope that nobody finds out that you were the one that was the cog or the wheel that didn't work. They start having rolling brown and blackouts beginning through certain affected regions. In the yellow regions in this map, they had a lot of shutdowns. There were some up in here. These ones were on warnings. There was a nuclear plant down here that got shut down. So their policy of cutting back on this energy from Australia was a bad decision, to put it mildly. They get 70% of their electricity and thermal power comes from coal. By summer 2021, factories are now ordered to run 1 to 3 days. So you can't get your stuff, or there's backlog of things that are out there, shortage of energy. And this, whether they're doing it on purpose or whether they did it or to affect other things, I'm not going to speculate on that. So if you look behind me, this loop that Jeremy figured out, I'm running a loop behind me. That picture was taken at LA Long Beach Port. And here's an aerial shot. The difference between 2 years ago and today is that you would see maybe one ship have to wait for a day or two off the coast. And then we see 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 or more. The shipping companies want to get their things to the closest port as possible. And things start to get backed up. Volume at ports increased since the winter of 2020. Many more container ships started arriving at LALB, Los Angeles Long Beach ports. More and more ships have to come from China due to backlog orders. Ships unable to dock due to any number of factors in the supply chain system affecting Los Angeles Long Beach port. It gets so bad that a record of 100 ships are at anchor off the coast on October 18th, just a few weeks ago. So what are the factors in the system that may be causing this? So I'm going to go over just a few. There's a lot to say about this sort of analysis, but let's just take a look at a few of them that you might be able to relate to, understand. The system is very fragile. They built themselves a very, very lean system, and it wasn't resilient. We have the system, it was working as growth was increasing over the past 30 years, but it's running at its limits. It was, the best optimization. If you have anything that gets in the way, it will break down. So these 6 categories, we have manpower, we have machinery, we have other assets like getting into the terminals, we have fuel. I mean, China right now, they have trucks, they don't have their diesel. We see what happens when places don't have their ability to get the fuel for their trucks. We have political, we'll talk about this with unions, and then physical distance. This is whether it's in the United States or whether it is the fact that we're so not intrinsically, but so closely tied to depending on Asia, thousands and thousands of miles away for about 50%, 60% of consumer goods. This system of shipping, 90% of all cargo is shipped by sea all around the world. Our manufactured goods, let's say about 2.5 trillion, and that we manufacture, and depending on what we import and what we export, and then the stuff that we get, I think it was like 580 in 2018, 580 billion. There is such a reliance on this supply chain system that if it breaks down for any significant time, we will have problems. Now, we won't necessarily have problems with food or fuel because we do that very well here, but other places will. So maybe you can't get your Peloton, but you won't have to worry about your car or your dinner table. So let's take a look at manpower here. So for example, workers at the port may have been sick due to COVID. So now you have a shortage of manpower for people. They can't very easily get people to work a gantry crane or to work the terminals. Some of it is very, very difficult. They have to be more specialized. There's certain COVID rules about distancing. There are problems that can happen, and they didn't have the flexibility to be able to hire people or to manage when there's a disruption. Plus, they have such a huge load of cargo that's coming in. So any decline in their productivity just adds to the backlog. Let's take a look at trucking. So some people during the time from 2020 into 2021 who are truckers, these, what would I call them? Blue collar wage workers, they may have to have their kids be taken care of with childcare. And if someone gets laid off or they have their child at home working on Zoom, who's going to be there? Who's going to take care of the kids? So, hey, if I'm going to quit my job and I've only been working for, let's say, 6 months, which the turnover rate of about 90 to 95% of the trucking industry, 90% of the turnover rate is due to the people that are 6 months or less on the job. And they just have this very high churn because it's a tough job. And the new people find out it's not all it's cracked up to be. But the point is that if you're getting your COVID stimulus, if you're getting your COVID payments, you're on unemployment, or you get the extra, I might as well stay home, take care of my kid. Why do I got to go out and do this job? And I'm killing myself. I'm running. Things are so slowed down. I can maybe get one container out of the port, get it to Ontario, drop it off. And now I got to take this empty all the way back. I get stuck in traffic. I can only work 10, 11 hours a day. And if I miss the time, I get stuck. The law, I have to shut down. So here's many reasons that could be associated to why the manpower will go down. But one of them is people they're better to stay at home with their own money. That's coming from the government. Warehouses. Again, you have these blue collar workers. Do I want to work in a warehouse and work all night and do all these things if I can just stay at home? What happens if they're sick? You have less people there. Again, many of the same problems. So if there's a problem here, it will cause delays here, or here could cause delays here. And for example, when Biden said, let's keep the ports open 24/7. Okay, but are your warehouses going to be open 24/7? Are your truckers going to come by and pick up the stuff? Why pick up cargo if I can't get it to a warehouse until the morning? So you're going to tell them they have to open up in the middle of the night? You're going to tell these container depots they have to be open 24/7? There's a very complicated chain. There could be 30 or 40 or 50 different people involved, whether they're at the port, whether they're dealing with the customs agents, whether they're dealing with the freight forwarder, all this kind of stuff. These people just saying open it up with a wave of your hand or a wand is not going to fix it. So this fragile system needs to be fixed. I don't know if any of the information and suggestions that I read about and came up with, that any of this could really fix it, but it's a long-term thing. The basic thing is you have to change the system where you put a piece of cargo on a rail car and send it all the way to Chicago. And then you've got to wait weeks until that container comes back. And the shipper's like, no, I don't want to do it. I don't want to wait. Just take it to the depot within the LA, Orange County, San Bernardino County area, drop it off and bring it back because I got to go pick up more stuff from China. There are many reasons. Everybody is trying to pursue their own interests, but there isn't the capacity and there isn't this flexibility. There isn't this resilience. What you could do is you could make these little zones, like just taking something from the ship to the shore, terminal just to the rail. Maybe there's a rail yard. Maybe you just have a place and then let those trains get their containers instead of having to have this stuff go from the port. Get everything out of the port and have them in these easy access places. Maybe they need to have more depots close to highways. Empty the import container, drop it out at the lot, do other things that have to do, increase the pool of operators. These people don't want to come back and work. You've got to give better incentives. You've got to change some of the regulations about, if I'm bringing back an empty container and it's only 25, 30,000 pounds, the truck versus a heavy, fully loaded 80,000. That thing, if you make a bad turn or wind or something like that, and the cargo shifts inside, you've got to be a much more professional driver. But let's say you have people that have, farm trucking licenses and they could drive it. Driving back an empty container is less risky. And maybe these trucks, these people that just do that, they go to a place, they pick it up. You might have to bring in the National Guard. I'm not going to get into government and what they should do in national emergency actions that they can do. But there has to be something to change because there's so much that's stuck. There's so much backlog. This system has to be fixed. There's equipment, let's say like chassis. Chassis are what you put the container on. They're broken. They can't get the parts. They haven't been fixed. They've been complaining about this for like 9 years. Everybody is just not looking at this as anything in this system could cause problems. Now, I know I've said a lot. I'm just going to give you a couple more things, and then I'll open it for discussion and questions. So happy Lunar New Year, 2022. So that's when China shuts down for 2 weeks. That's going to be a problem. Everybody knows that it happens, but they try to plan around it. With this crunch that we have right now, those 2 weeks when things are shut down, I don't think there's going to be resolved by then. So we're just going to wait for this to mess things up. This one is the big one. The ILWU, the International Longshore and Warehouse Union, and the PMA, the Pacific Maritime Association, their contract expires July 1st. In the last time in 2014, the contract was up. It took 9 months to get it resolved. This time, what's the big question on the agenda? Automation at the ports. That's something like what Rotterdam has done. These are controlled by people in an office that can oversee the port facilities, and with 5G networks, these things cost 500 billion? No, 500 million. I have to check the numbers, but they're really, really expensive. Probably 500 million. Yeah, that makes more sense. But they are more efficient. 40% reduction in the personnel and 80% increase in productivity. China, like the Ningbo facility, they shut down for a while because they found coronavirus cases not too long ago in August. But that's an automated place also. So this is on the agenda. Happy New Year. Look for this, a problem. I don't think this is going away for at least another 13 months. Maybe it'll go into 2023. We'll see. That's it. Thank you very much. And I'm ready for your questions.